When I was asked to do a little presentation, I kind of panicked. I haven't done that in a while. I've been dealing with cancer, and before that, I was working from home, and the last year has been pretty amazing in a lot of ways. And choosing a topic, I just looked at the Greens website and said, there's one here that really jumps out at me. And this is the one I want to talk about. So the title is What Feminism Means to Me. And before we go to the next slide, I want to say thank you to the Greens who made this template. I found it in my Google Drive. I must have requested a template at some point from someone, and they gave this to me. So it's a long list of people who are listed in the details, but awesome template. Okay, next slide. I'm Erika Darling. I'm here because I'm a new member, and that's the more specific sense. Generally, I would say after decades of, I would call it political voyeurism is what I do. And I have a degree in political science. I decided, based upon my life experiences in the past year, that I really needed to get away from the two-party dichotomy. It just was unhealthy for the nation as well as for myself. I've flirted with joining the Greens many times, hence the template that I had. I don't even remember that. But now I really feel motivated in a way, and like I can spare resources, personal resources, in a way that I haven't been able to before. If you want to send me an email, you can reach me at legallydarling.com at gmail.com, sorry. And it's a play on my name. I changed my name to Darling, so I'm Legally Darling. And also I've been to law school twice and dropped out twice. I don't like lawyers. Okay, next slide. Looking at the Green Party's platform, which I think it really aligns closely with my own personal values. And all of these bullet points are listed as goals that need to be addressed, or items that need to be addressed within our society on the platform. So it's under the heading of civil rights and equal rights, women's rights specifically. I don't need to go into detail about what social equality is, reproductive rights, economic equality, violence and oppression. I think most members of a progressive party are going to have similar views on these, although of course there's room for individual differences, and I respect those. I'm more interested specifically in how we go about addressing the protection of people who are not cisgender males. So I'm aligning that with the women's rights section of the platform. And not that, I mean, I'm just a new member, but it occurs to me that perhaps that language is outdated. So let's go to the next slide. So when you look up gender equality or sexual equality, you can find a lot of quotes. And this is the one that resonated with me. What's a queen without her king? Well, historically more powerful. I'm a student of history, especially European history prior to 1700. And there are so many examples of a person who was designated as queen who could have been more powerful if she had not been in the social system she was in. So I liked that quote for this reason. Next slide. So really what we're dancing around here is a concept that I think it's come to public discussion in the past decade, but more particularly in the past 2 or 3 years, this idea of gender, defined as sex-based social structures and gender identity. It's a broad topic, and I'm just going to try to narrow down the little piece of it that I have a strong opinion about. So next slide. in my research about sexual equality and women's rights, of course, I come across these terms femininity and masculinity, and two different schools of thought concerning those. And sometimes there's overlap. I mean, there's a lot of discussion about how these affect each other, but is gender, is that something that is a social cultural construction? In our society, we have two genders, male and female, or men and women. And if you don't neatly fit in one of those popularized conceptions, there can be some problems. Then there's the biological aspect, and I am not qualified to discuss that in any detail at all. But I do recognize, as someone who worked in the financial services industry for decades, that gender and biological sex are very different. And I know when I was writing policy forms, applications for insurance, discussing them with state regulators, this issue was beginning to be a topic of conversation as recently as 5 years ago. And I don't know if the general public is aware of the commercial aspects of gender and sexual identity. And I think that ties in very importantly into how we as a society move forward with promoting equitable civil rights for all of our citizens. So next slide. This is my last slide. I kept this really short. I don't want to get into a lot of details, just to give you where I am with it. So the first wave feminism, we're all familiar with that. The suffragettes, the people who campaigned for the vote for women as well as men. Of course, that was limited to just white women and white men in a lot of senses. But that was the first wave feminism, and there's a lot of debate about when it ended. I know that my grandmother, who died in 2011, she was 101 years old when she died. She never really spoke about the women's movement at all. And that really surprises me, because she was a very strong-minded woman and very respected in her community, but she just didn't feel it was necessary. She was a first wave feminist, I think. She was smart and inserted herself, but she didn't push very hard. Second wave feminism, that's the one that I think most people are more familiar with. And I certainly grew up as a young child with the Equal Rights Amendment going through each state legislature to be ratified, and all of the conversation around that. In the second wave, the conversation was broadened to include economic equality, which we still haven't achieved. No matter how we define people, how we sort them out as men, women, non-binary, it's obvious that cisgender white males, which some people call the patriarchy, I don't like to give it that name for various reasons, but they benefit from a society that's really been written for and managed by them. And then the last wave, I hope that we solve this whole question about feminism and rights among people, regardless of sexual identity, sexual orientation. Not only that, but their gender identity, their gender orientation. I'm hoping we're going to, as a people, as a culture, move past that. That puts me into the group, the camp that's known as radical feminists. And of course, that was a very scary term for most of the people that I grew up with. I'm from this area, and they didn't like the idea of completely changing everything. I think that after spending 50 years observing what's been happening with civil rights in this country, and women's rights as a subset of that, I think we're long overdue to change our approach. And I'm tired of hearing that it's not time, we can't do it, we can't even agree. And I respect what the Green Party has in its platform concerning this. I just think that it's a bigger issue than just women anymore. So that's my take on what feminism means to me.